Hello everyone, it's your Peacekeeper. Welcome back to the lounge. It's time for the next video in our How to Play series on the French battleship line. This is the Tier 6 Normandie class of battleships. The Normandie class of battleships was a class of 5 ordered battleships that were laid down between 1913 and 1914 for the French Navy. The 5 ships of the class were Normandie, Flandre, Gascogne, Languedoc, and Béarn. The Normandie class was represented a step improvement over the preceding Bretagne class. The intention was to improve firepower and protection while maximizing the dimensions of the ship to the limits of what the French naval yards could build. Originally planned to have 16 16-inch guns in 4 quadruple turrets and a top speed of approximately 20 knots, Normandie and her sisters would have been the most powerful battleships launched in the world at the time. The original plans were scrapped, however, and instead they opted to keep the 340mm guns of the Bretagne class and mount them in quadruple turrets, provided that the quadruple turrets could be completed before the ship's keels were laid down. Protection mirrored that of Bretagne, but propulsion took a rapid departure. The first 4 ships were to have a mix of 2 direct drive steam turbines on the inner 2 shafts and 2 reciprocating triple expansion steam engines on the outer shafts for low speed cruising and fuel economy. Béarn was different though. She had a 4 direct drive turbine setup, which was installed for testing for future battleship design. Power was provided by a mix of coal and fuel oil. The turret design of quadruple turrets was chosen because it offered the greatest concentration of firepower in the least amount of tonnage, while not sacrificing much in the way of overall survivability. Each quadruple turret had the 4 guns divided into 2 pairs, and each pair was mounted in a combined sleeve, forcing them to elevate at the same rate. The pairs were separated by a 40mm thick bulkhead, which provided protection should a shell enter one side or the other. It wouldn't knock out all 4 guns of the turret, provided it didn't also knock out the traverse mechanism for the entire turret. The service history: even though all ships were laid down and launched from their slipways, none were actually completed as battleships, and only Béarn was launched in anything that resembled a complete ship. Béarn was converted into an aircraft carrier and utilized until 1967 when she was sold for scrap. The cancellation of these ships was due to the outbreak of World War I, and Béarn's conversion to an aircraft carrier would not actually come until 1927, even though around 1920 the ship was utilized with an impromptu flight deck as a test bed for French naval aircraft design. She would never launch any aircraft in anger, though, due to the fall of France in World War II, and her world tour, if you could call it that, to various ports as her crew leaned towards the Vichy French, which is the Nazi sympathizer French forces. And it wouldn't be until 1944 that she would actually be turned over to the Free French forces and actually rearmed and refit with U.S. anti-aircraft batteries and radars, etc. In terms of their in-game playstyle, the Normandie class has a few unfortunate aspects about them. At Tier 6, the 340mm guns start to feel very weak and anemic. Combined with poor overall aiming arcs and poor overall protection, she starts to feel like an oversized cruiser with a very long reload. She isn't without her benefits, though, and this only reinforces the belief that she's a cruiser more than a battleship, and that is that she is extremely fast for a Tier 6 battleship at 29.5 knots. She also has very good maneuverability with 640-meter turning circle radius and a 10.8 second rudder shift time. This allows her to maneuver into firing position, fire off all of her turrets, and then quickly return to an angle position before the enemy can effectively engage her. Combine this with the sheer number of guns, and she is very skilled at removing cruisers from the game, which quite honestly should be her focus if at all possible. The secondary battery is functional and has a situationally usable range at approximately 6.3 kilometers, and that's without a full secondary build. However, I can't help but think, due to their low overall damage and relatively low fire chance and long reload, that they're nothing more than really fireworks at this tier. And I wouldn't really recommend going full-on secondary build with her, although you certainly can give it a shot. Overall, the grind is kind of frustrating. It can be kind of frustrating. Like I said, combining Normandie's 340mm guns with the fact that Tier 6 ships see Tier 8 more than they see Tier 4 or 5 means that she's rarely top tier and almost always ends up facing up against Tier 8 ships. And when you get up tiered, it's best to play this ship like a giant cruiser with a very long reload and okay-ish armor and hit points. The heal is about the only thing that really keeps her in battle longer than a couple of minutes, and, well, it's not anything special. It's just like every other battleship's heal. So, with all of that, the ship feels downright weak compared to her other Tier 6 counterparts. And I can't help but think that ships like the New Mexico and Bayern actually end up being slightly better in the long run over Normandie. That said, the ship does have her fun moments as well, and we'll see a couple of those in the battle video. But before we get there, we got to talk about the stats. So Normandie has 48,300 hit points, up to 364 millimeters of armor, which again is going to be in the back of the turrets? No! Wow. Would you look at that? It's going to be the front of the turrets this time. Apparently they did a better job of balancing out the turrets. 364 in the barbette. Okay. And torpedo damage reduction, 16%, which is really quite weak, actually, for a battleship at this tier. Main battery consists of 3 quadruple mounts of housing 340mm guns, 19.8 kilometer range, 30-second reload time, a 38.3 second 180-degree turn time, 4,700 HE shell damage, 26% fire chance, 9,500 AP shell damage, and there is a difference between the AP and HE shell velocity, so something to keep in mind there. The AP shells have very, very, very high arcs, and that can be kind of hard to use if you're not used to aiming with guns that have very lofty shells. Again, U.S. battleship captains are going to feel right at home in this ship in terms of overall aiming point on the crosshair. Secondary battery is a mix of 6 dual 90mm guns. These are going to also be part of your anti-aircraft suite. There they are. They also have 18 139mm guns. These are all mounted in the hull in casemates, and they are only for your secondaries. Anti-aircraft defense is okay. It exists, which is more than we can say about some other battleships at this tier. 4 dual 13.2mm guns. Those have a range of just 1.2 kilometers. 6 dual 37mm guns, range of 3 kilometers. And the 6 dual 90mm gun mounts, the range of 4 kilometers. Overall, like I said, the AA exists. It's slightly better than some at this tier, but it's really not that good. Speaking of what is good, though, at Tier 6, 29.5 knots of top speed, 640 meter turning circle radius, 10.8 second rudder shift time, and I can't help but think that the rudder on this ship is very, very effective, meaning that at half rudder, or even in between half and full, the ship really does turn quite well. Detection range by sea, 13.5 kilometers. Detection range by air of 8.9 kilometers. In terms of upgrades, I'm running Main Armaments Mod 1 in the first slot. That's going to reduce the risk of your main battery being incapacitated by 20%. It's going to increase the hit points of it by 50%, and decrease the time it takes to repair them by 20%. You could also run Magazine Mod 1 at this tier for a 70% reduction in the chance of your magazine being detonated, where battleship detonations are pretty rare. Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1, you're going to lose secondaries no matter what you have, and quite honestly, the secondaries in this ship, I really don't think they're worth speccing fully into. So at this point, I really wouldn't recommend Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1. In the second slot, I'm running Damage Control Systems Mod 1 for the minus 5% chance of catching fire and minus 3% chance of flooding. At this tier, it's really about the only thing that matters because your chances of losing your engine or rudder are already plenty rare, and usually you'll have the ability to tank a couple more shots, even if you were to lose them, while you wait for your damage control party to get up, assuming that your damage control party isn't already up. Usually what takes out the engines and the steering gears on this ship are going to be torpedoes or citadel hits to the amidships section. In the third slot, you can see here I'm running Secondary Battery Mod 2 for the 20% increase in the firing range of the secondaries, as well as a 20% decrease in the dispersion of the secondaries. I would also recommend Aiming Systems Mod 1, and actually, you're going to see a battle video in which I use Secondary Mod 2, but I think Aiming Systems Mod 1 is going to be much better for the general purpose role and the longer ranged engagements that Tier 6 ships will face in constant Tier 8 up tiers. So my recommendation is actually for Aiming Systems Mod 1. This is going to decrease the dispersion of your ship by 7%. It does also boost the firing range of your secondaries by 5%. And decrease the dispersion by 5%. Either of those two options are preferable at this tier. The ship's AA is okay. Buffing its range isn't going to help it much, so I honestly wouldn't waste the points there. In the last slot, I am running Steering Gears Mod 2 for a 20% reduction in the rudder shift time. I could also see somebody making a pretty good case for switching that out for Damage Control Systems Mod 2, which is going to decrease the time it takes to recover from a fire or flooding by 15%. Alright, well that's enough of talking about the ship in port. Let's go look at it in a battle video. Alright, so we are here in our typical Tier 6 up tier, that is to Tier 8. We're going to get to see a little bit of everything on this one. We're going to get to see some AP use, some HE use, some secondaries, a little bit of AA. Unfortunately, We're up tiered and there are aircraft carriers, so that only adds insult to injury as, well, this thing's anti-aircraft battery at this tier might as well not even exist. There are definitely ships that fare better in these up tiers than Normandie, but man, I don't know what to really tell you about that. Just, oof, rough. So, okay, so we're gonna quickly get off to a start here. The map is Neighbors. This is actually a pretty good map. In terms of overall map strategy with Normandy, it's pretty much going to fall down to basically the same exact tactics that I've always used. I spend a lot of time up in the north fighting around the islands because it allows you to disengage from the fight and heal and repair. Going to the to the south is a great way to end up not in the fight, because generally speaking all the fighting happens around the islands to the north, and so you would be kind of a miss to not actually go there. Now sometimes you'll get enemies that will go to the south, sometimes the enemy team will go to the south, and you can actually utilize your positioning in the north to shoot at their broadsides, which is an advantage to you, not a disadvantage. So anyway, here you can see the gun arcs. This is how much of a broadside you need to expose. You pretty much have to expose a full broadside, as that rear turret can only really traverse to about the 45-degree angle mark. And it really is very uncomfortable to use this ship in close engagements, which we will see a little bit of in this battle. On the upside, your middle turret faces forward, which means that at least you can bring 8 guns to bear quite easily. It's not always the easiest thing in the world to do, though. Okay, so we're going to start off. We've got ourselves Edinburgh here, so we're going to shoot at him. And you can see the dispersion at this range is quite large. However, it does come with some added benefits. We were able to get a hit and an overpen. 4,085 damage. An okay start to an otherwise long match. So we've got a lot of targets to shoot here. This Cleveland. I don't know why this Cleveland is operating out in the open, but he is. There's a little bit better dispersion. Maybe this time we'll get a good hit. Ooh, looks like it. And nope. One normal pen, one over pen. Another 4,080 damage. That must be 85 damage because the way it's ending up there. We're up to 8,170 damage. And really looking for targets. Now you can see here, that's what I was talking about with the, if you're in the north and you're in the right place in the north, it's quite easy to get broadside targets to shoot at if they head to the south. They're basically all, yeah, there we go. 21,850 damage, 2 citadels and 3 overpens against Mogami. Mogami's citadel is quite massive, so for a ship like this that has shotgun spread effect, that's pretty useful. I can't help but think, though, if I was in, like, New Mexico, that we would have probably one-shotted that poor Mogami. We're gonna boop the Leningrad here. My bad. My bad. And shots out of the Mahan. Oh, and we get the kill. One normal pen there for 2,447 damage, which basically nuked his hit points. Our Tirpitz is running headlong into enemy fire. Would not have been my choice. And here you can see we're waiting on our guns to come back up. Look at our speed. You know, we're going 28.5 knots and we're rapidly increasing. I mean, that's nothing to really sneeze at. That's actually really quite good. Okay, so at this point we're going to try and focus down this Cleveland if we can. Ooh, he's making my favorite shot there. But we're going to have to, unfortunately, make choices. Shots are falling. 2 normal pens, 4 over pens for about 6,000 damage, somehow. I think pretty much all of that, those normal pens went into modules. But you can see here, actually, the turning radius of the ship is tight enough that we were able to make that turn back and really mitigate quite a lot of damage. But of course, we're only facing cruisers over here, predominantly facing a Royal Navy cruiser, U.S. cruiser. There is a York, there's the Leander, there's a Mogami. This is actually a really beneficial position for this ship. In fact, it's one of the better positions this ship could actually be in. Now, we're sitting here waiting for the front turrets to traverse around. And someone was asking on the Bretagne video, or on the French Battleship Captain video, rather. They were commenting that they think it's insane that anyone would spec into expert marksman on a French battleship. And I can't help but think that no, quite honestly, it's very useful. So... we shot at that Edinburgh, but his acceleration outpaced our aim point, so we were unable to hit him. So up to 41,000 damage, basically, 1 kill. The north is routing, however, our team is still predominantly behind islands, not really effectively engaging enemy ships. And once again, we're sitting here waiting for our turrets to traverse. And I can't help but point out that expert marksman on battleships is probably one of the most important skills you can get. So there's a salvo out, thinking, man, we sure as heck are going to get this guy. 805 damage. Fine, we'll shoot off the middle turret. Wasn't planning on it. And a Citadel for the kill. All 904 damage of that Citadel. Meanwhile, the York, with his built-in IFHE, just lopped off 4,500 hit points, and woo, all the joys that brings. Oh, look, now we're on fire again. So at this point, we're going to pop our heal. We got ourselves Mogami over here. Let's see if we can't remove Mogami from this fight. That would be a good one to remove. Dispersion looks really good. Still taking fire from that York. Dispersion looks good, but unfortunately falls aft of the ship. Only 8,100 damage, no Citadel hits to finish him off. Mogami ends up disappearing, and now we're kind of out in the open, for lack of a better phrase. For us to win this fight right now wouldn't be terribly difficult if the team would push forward. However, they are pushing quite heavily in the south, and if you'll pay attention, their Bismarck is all the way in the south. He's going to make an end run up here to the north. And this is probably a very good tactic for him because he recognizes that there's 2 battleships up here that are pushing with cruiser support. And, yep, you can see the Bismarck down in the south there. And with all of that support, he knows that his cruisers aren't going to last very long, so he's going to start pushing. Now, I'm up here, admittedly, out in the open, trying to motivate my team to move forward. 2 overpens there, not a whole lot of damage. Trying to motivate my team to like help, but as you can see, the North Carolina is running. Actually, I think he's turning to engage the Bismarck, maybe the Queen Elizabeth. In hindsight, really, I should have probably just turned around and done my best to avoid taking further damage, but you know what they say, hindsight 2020. So, our carrier is up close. It sounds like he's going to at least try and get some fighters over top of me to help out. We're going to turn into these torpedoes. The Normandie's maneuverability is such that it can sneak through torpedo drops like this, which is really quite useful. Felt pretty good about this after all of that. Lexington wasted a whole bunch of aircraft. Ooh, shots out there trying to get the last hit off that Cleveland or the Mogami. I forget which. But I don't think we're going to get anything. Yep. A little bit of a tactical beach here. Not a good one. Just wanted to check out this rock formation. It was pretty sweet. Moving on, overall tactics, this actually ends up working out in our favor, but as you can see, that Bismarck is, he's 16.5K out. I didn't really think he was going to be coming in here as hot and heavy as he was, but oh, he is. And our North Carolina is starting to retreat full term now. So that's not a good sign. That means we are definitely up here by ourselves. Shikaku. Look at Shikaku's location. That's going to become very important here in a little bit. And Cleveland, of course, disappears. Aim, shoot. Trying to take some cruisers out of this fight. Cleveland is being very, very squirrely, so it's hard to hit. 1 overpen, 950 damage. Not really all that impressive. Mogami, the ship that got away. York, the ship that is being really annoying. Well, at this point, we're just going to break line of sight and do what we can. This Bismarck is coming in hot and heavy now. 12.8K, we're about to be in a secondary range, so it would behoove me to get out of here. Of course, the York manages to stealth back up. No spotting. We need to run. We need to get out of here. Because this Bismarck is going to be a problem. Because we cannot protect ourselves from his 15-inch guns. And you'll see just how quickly the hit point pools will start disappearing once 15-inch gunnery starts getting into this fight. Okay, traverse our turrets to the other side. Oh, come on, give me a Citadel hit. Nope. 2 hits for, I think it was right around 9K. 2 normal pens and 2 overpens for right around 9K. Bismarck secondaries are opening up, but we're about to break line of sight, and he's shooting HE at us, at least initially. And of course he would start that fire. And of course that fire would keep me lit just enough for this York to see me. Oh my. Okay, 2 fires burn our damage control party. Finally out of detection. Starting to work our angles here. We've got 2 kills, 60,000 damage. We're able to fire that without being detected. Hoping for another kill here. Nope, 1,900 damage with 2 overpens. Still working this island between us. Leningrad here. Informing the Shikaku he needs to turn around. It's not going to work. Somehow, the Leningrad is firing. That's how I was going to say. Somehow the Leningrad is detected. He dies. Part of me kind of wishes he would have stayed alive, because he could have easily gotten a decent set of torpedoes off, I think. But 2 pens there on the Cleveland, leaving him with only 2,200 hit points. Using our maneuverability here to get around this island, trying to avoid getting hit, if at all possible. Trying to prolong this as much as possible, maybe hoping that our ships in the south will be able to engage them. You can see our North Carolina is broadside to that key, which is never a good sign. You should not be broadside to enemy battleships in any battleship. Should not be broadside to any battleships in any cruisers, except for maybe some of the low-tier French cruisers, which have no armor. You can see we've tanked in a Tier 8 fight 1.2 million damage. Almost 1.3 million worth of damage. Okay, so now we're going to start seeing the potential damage start racking up here. He's shooting at the carrier, but his secondaries are aimed at us. And we have dodged out of the way here because we're going to let this aircraft carrier tank some of this, because he's either out of strike aircraft, which wouldn't surprise me, or out of fighters. I think he's actually out of both. So at that point, he's nothing more than an XP pinata. Not for me. I was kind of thinking maybe, just maybe, he'll come around fast enough I'll be able to engage him, and then I realized, no, unfortunately, Mac Daddy is not moving fast enough out for me to actively engage him in any realistic manner. So we're gonna kind of go around the corner here and see if maybe we can't muscle him around a little bit. We've got we've got a bit of a. He's got a hit point pool advantage. He's got the gun advantage. He's got the secondary advantage. But I wanted to show you guys just how ineffective the secondaries are on this ship. Our Shikaku is now burning to death, so that means we're going to be losing spotting here pretty soon. But I wanted to show you how the secondaries aren't working that well, and the reasons why we should probably not be speccing into secondaries at this tier. So once again, getting our guns onto target, making sure that we're lined up, because we're going to have about one good shot at this Bismarck before the pain starts. Okay, so there's the Bismarck. We're going to shoot, we're clear, and he lops off 3/4 of my hit points, and I don't. That's because I was having to expose too much of a broadside in order to effectively engage him. And this is what I was talking about with the, the ship is pretty fragile overall, but we're engaging each other quite effectively with secondaries here. So he starts me on fire. I'm gonna bait a couple shots into the armor belt to mitigate some damage. Gonna shoot again. Gonna get some pretty good damage, 6,200. Bringing those rear two guns to bear, and we've brought out another 11,000. So we quickly jumped up to 97,818 damage. And here I kind of turn a little too much into him. But, and there we go. So we've had 27 shell hits, and you're going to see at the end of this battle, you're going to see exactly how much damage that did. I want you guys to think in your head, okay, 27 shell hits on most battleships would do X amount of damage. And then we'll cover this as we get to the end battle screen. But, okay, so you saw a lot of things in this battle. You saw that Normandie's speed is really quite good. Its maneuverability is also quite good. Shell dispersion is tolerable. However, we're working on... working with pretty anemic shells in terms of overall damage, which doesn't really help the situation out any. And overall decent range... Secondaries, we're going to talk about that. Not a whole lot extra to talk about there right now, because I don't want to give it away too much. But as far as, punishing enemy cruisers go, I think the ship is really quite good at it. That was the one consistent thing that the ship had in my time playing it. And overall, there are worse things in this world, I guess. I do think, though, as far as Tier 6 battleships go, I think I'd much rather be in a New Mexico. I would certainly much rather be in an Arizona. Heck, even Warspite and Queen Elizabeth, I think, offer more than Normandy does. And that's kind of an unfortunate circumstance at the end of the day, but... Okay, pro tip again, North Carolina still sailing broadside, North Carolina shooting at the waterline of the key. He would have probably gotten that kill had he aimed at the guns or aimed at the superstructure so that his shells impacted the superstructure. And probably would have survived that fight. So there's a tip for those who are wondering. Our hipper low on hit points. It's our last ship left. Secondaries take him out. Alright, end battle screen. So have that number in your head about the secondaries. 27 shell hits. Should do X amount of damage. Okay. So 98,149 damage, 2 kills, 3 citadel, 1,122. Look at the shell damage. 990. Not even 1,000 damage with those shells. I know that went by kind of quick, but go back and pause it. Not a whole lot of damage there. Anyway, overall, Normandy, kind of frustrating to play. It's an alright ship. The grind is medium length. Anyway, I am your Peacekeeper. Thanks for stopping by the lounge. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching.